So my thoughts for this is it's pretty like conversational and based on what things you guys are interested in. So not sure how interesting a recording will be to people. It's not like a presentation. But anyway, so I wanted to go through some things today for people with the organizations I work with nueBOX. We have a residency coming up, and also with the city of Tempe, we have some 3 opportunities for artists to apply for. Tiffany, do you have noise in your background?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you hear it?
Yeah, could you just mute and then when you want to talk, unmute yourself? Okay, awesome. So yeah, so I wanted to maybe ask you guys what things you were, I'll maybe go through the things and then find out a little bit what each of you are interested in, and then we can talk about those things more specifically. So I'm gonna share my screen with you. How do I do that? What?
Oh. You can share the screen. Are you going to share the screen with us?
Yes, okay. All right, so awesome. So some of the things that we have are either, Zoo, are you graduating this semester or next semester?
Next semester.
Okay, so I imagine for both of you, probably the nueBOX seed residency isn't going to be what we're going to talk about because it's kind of for, Haley, am I right? Is this for people, are students allowed to apply for this for the summer?
That's a good question. I'm not sure offhand. Actually I can pull it up right now. Actually, I'll go get on my other computer and double check.
Okay, Haley will check, and then I'll just talk about the City of Tempe things. So there's basically 3 opportunities. One is the Vibrant City Grant, and this is available to individual artists, but really it's looking for more of like an arts collective kind of base, where there's, it's not just for like one artist to work in the studio by themselves like a nueBOX residency is. It's for like some kind of public outward thing that probably involves collaborators and like other partners and stuff. And that's for up to $2,500. And then there's the museum series, which is something they put on at the Tempe History Museum. And this is pretty broad, but basically the structure is usually like people come, they have like coffee and cookies and stuff, and they do kind of like some component of like lecturing or talking about something, and then like some kind of hands-on demonstration. So you can do like workshops or panel discussions, like hands-on community arts programs, site-specific performances, or like cultural presentations. So we've had like the Peruvian ladies have done like a Peruvian hot chocolate thing there for the museum experience. And then there's the call for workshop ideas. So if you have an idea about some kind of artist support or like artist development or entrepreneurship kind of workshop that you have skills in that you would like to lead with other people, or share with other people, you can apply for this to share your workshop with others. So yeah, do any of those sound, well, first maybe if I could hear from each of you about why you kind of joined in on this call today and what you want to get out of it.
Yeah, I will go first.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, because all my performance and projects are done at ASU, and I'm a little bit shy to present my work outside, so I want to have a so I just barely trying to see what are the opportunities outside, and I think I'm more curious about how to apply it when I prepare something. Is there some tips that can like yeah, just some experience, if you can share some experience with me about how to prepare the materials to apply it, more focus on the application process. I think that will be what I'm expecting.
Okay, perfect. What about you, Tiffany?
I just wanted to get information and share experience, get experience that people have had. Pretty much the same thing, just trying to gather information.
Cool. So it sounds like it would be good to just talk about like general things to think about when you're applying for calls. Does that sound good? Yeah. And then you all have applied for things before. Haley and Tiffany, well, Tiffany received a grant from the city last year, and Haley has also received like residency and grant opportunities. And have you also, you applied for grad school, so you gotta have some skills there.
Yeah.
and other things. So I feel like if anyone has any like thoughts or things to add, like please just you can say them. So one thing that I always tell people to first do is to look at the organization and what they are about and what they're really interested in. And like the first question is, who is the funder? Like, where is the money coming from and what do they care about? Just to see if it's even a good fit, because there's so many calls out there and our time is like we only have time for so much. So make sure it's a good fit, and make sure that you're not like trying to form what you do into something that you don't really care about, that you're going to be stuck to do because you received money or got an opportunity and you're like, I don't even want to do this. So I think that's a good thing to look at. So for example, for the city of Tempe, I always ask people like, who is the funder of city programs? Like, who puts the money towards it? Anyone want to answer?
The government, the Tempe city.
What was that?
The Tempe city, maybe they have some institutions like managing, organizing all the art.
Yeah, and then where do they get their money from?
The federal.
The people and like businesses.
For sure. So it's like all tax money. So it's the people who live in the city. So anything that's going to be like city government funded has to support the people of the community because they're the ones paying for it. So that's always like a big thing to think about, I think, for especially like federal or local like government calls is, it becomes like less about like, while your art and your things are super important, like you have to really make a case of how this is going to be of value to the people that are paying for it. For nueBOX, I don't know, where do you think our money comes from?
From the supporters and funders.
Yeah, like, and most of our supporters and funders are part of the arts community. They're interested in experimental art. They're interested in supporting artists. Maybe a lot of them are artists or people who have gone through our programs in the past. So they have kind of different things in mind of what they want. And I think it's for nonprofits and things. I'm going to share my screen again. Can you see my screen?
Who is talking?
I got lost.
We can still see your screen.
You can see my screen? Oh, perfect. Yeah. Okay.
Can see your.
With nueBOX and for lots of like nonprofit organizations or things that aren't like state government ran, if you're applying, or like a residency call, if you're applying, it's good to go check out their website and see what they're about and like what they value. So I would go to like the nueBOX mission, and like right away you see some words here that you're like, oh, that's what they care about. Or in their mission statement, they have some words. And then when you're writing your application, you want to like tap into as many of those words or things that possibly relate to what you're doing, because then there's like a clear connection, right? Like, oh, they care about this and I care about this, so like we're a good fit. Okay. Can you see my face now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So that's always the first thing I tell people to look at. Like, is this even a good fit for you? And what are the things that they even care about? Because that's kind of like your frame of reference for anything you're going to write. You're going to be thinking about those things. So we get a lot of applications from nueBOX that are very clear to us that like they didn't read the application or the guidelines. So that's another really big thing. And I'll go back to my screen. I'll go back to the nueBOX page. So we have a lot of like information about our specific programs on the website and like who is even eligible. You know, here it says this residency is open to interdisciplinary or collaborative as like two big words. So if you're a solo artist only working in one medium, you're probably not eligible for what we're doing. If you don't live in Metro Phoenix, you're probably not eligible. And those kinds of things. We also have with like our other residency that's going to be open soon. In the larger description, it says you're not eligible unless you're you can't be a student unless you're part of a team with like non-students, because we're really about like giving resources to people who need them. So yeah, so that's the one thing, is looking at like what are the guidelines and what is the call, and like reading through it. With the Tempe Arts grants, a lot of times things will say like, you know, the three that I was kind of telling you about that all of you are eligible for, like they are open to individual artists. So great, but pretty much nothing ever says that. So something good to know, even for our larger grant that's for like up to $10,000. You can use a fiscal sponsor. I don't know, does anyone want to share like what a fiscal sponsor is to you?
It's someone who's supporting maybe like a workshop or a venture that you're doing, and you're under their name, but they're supporting you. Is that right?
That's definitely more like a partnership, which then you could apply along with them, as you know, someone who's working on it and you're in partnership. Usually a fiscal sponsor they're not really part of the project. Lots of organizations and governments only want to give funding to nonprofits. So a nonprofit organization will take the money and then give it to you as the person like doing the work. And then from there, they're pretty hands off. So they're not super involved, but they're just like a funnel that the money goes through to get to someone else.
A lot of dance artists use Fractured Atlas, which is like an umbrella program that you can apply to like use their non-for-profit status, so that you don't have to specifically become one.
Right. And because being a nonprofit is challenge, it has a lot of things. One, it like costs money, and also your purposes have to be like really strongly that you want to like support a community need versus like your own artwork. Even though your artwork might be also supporting community needs, it just has to have like a different mission to it. So yeah, a lot of artists and dancers use fiscal sponsors, and I generally recommend for people to do that. But say you were an artist and you're like, I'm going to put together this huge festival that's like $20,000. Like Breaking Ground is a great example, right? So she's not a nonprofit, but she uses a fiscal sponsor. Contour Dance uses a fiscal sponsor every year because that festival costs a lot of money to put together, and needs more support than some of these like individual artist grants. So yeah, that's just a tip to know. Don't think that you can't apply for something just because you're not a nonprofit. There's things out there. nueBOX supports a lot of organizations. We support Flamenco, Por La Vida, and Worth the Wait as fiscal sponsors. That just means we like take the money and give it to them. It's a pretty easy process. But organizations like Fractured Atlas that Haley was talking about provide other support to like if you're a member, they have some kind of different insurance plans and like other things that you might need as an artist. So definitely something to look into.
I think there's like I think I've used it once before. There was like a $35 fee.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to pay like that $35. I think the price might have changed to use it, but then if you don't get the grant, I don't know if you get the money back or not. I don't know. There's details there that, just be aware of.
Yeah. I would say if you know an organization that's a nonprofit and they'll just help you out, they're probably not going to take a fee, and that's a better path to go. So, and it's easier. There's not a lot of paperwork, like maybe you want something in writing, like a letter or an email of like confirmation, but it's much more relaxed.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on those two things that are like super just like fact sterile? No. Okay. So I thought we could maybe talk through how you put things into an application. Do you want to look at one of the City of Tempe applications or look at the Seed Residency application as a model? All right, I'm gonna go with a City of Tempe one just because I think it has a little bit more detail. We just start. Nope. What?
Can we do the museum one? There's
The
one.
museum one?
Yeah, the museum series.
Yeah. So these are all kind of written for artists, so they're like a lot less detailed than like that big one that I talked about that's like 10,000. That's like a much more robust grant. But these other three are meant to be like a little bit easier to get through, but some of the same things apply. So I'm gonna go back to my screen. So in the museum series, there's a lot of information on like a PDF form. And I think what's nice in some of these things is they'll give you examples of past projects. You can also usually see like on a website, for a lot of people, they'll show like what was previously funded. So you can get a sense of like, oh, these are the kinds of projects that they fund and like things that I should think about when crafting my own project. So that's a really good thing to go look at. And for here in the museum grant, it talks a little bit about past projects that they've had there that they really liked. So you can get a sense of what has happened there. And also I think just how broad things have been, right? Like they had like bikes and beer, but then they had like experimental music from Oh My Ears. And then they had like Japanese roots and taiko drumming, right? So it has lots of like range. Also, just as a heads up, all these deadlines and dates are going to end up being pushed back. I don't know till when at this point, but everything is going to be pushed back a little bit. It also tells you what kinds of things you'll get, which is good to know. So this is good to read. You're going to get free space. You're going to get audio visual equipment, because when you're going to have to maybe write a budget later or something, you know that you don't need to put those things into your budget when you're trying to talk about how you're going to use this money. You're like, oh, well, the space is free and I don't need to rent equipment. So you can use that money on other things. And then always looking at, as I said, what things what is not funded. A big thing with cities, like anything that is religious in nature, because of separation of city and state. We have individuals who are currently full-time faculty full-time faculty at a college or university are not eligible to apply, but as students or adjunct teachers, you are, if you apply as like an artist, not as a university backing. And that's just because lots of times anything that the faculty does is it just goes toward, it says it's the university doing it. And we're just trying to provide resources where people need resources. So big thing in every application usually has questions of what is going to be in the application. And this is really good to open your own separate Word document and put these into a Word document and start writing there. So you're not going to the actual application and trying to write things out on an application, because you need to do a lot of editing and rereading. Also, I think of it the same way as in dance, when we like just go to the studio and like improvise and like get weird and make mistakes. That's the same way to approach grant writing, right? You go, you like word vomit all over your Microsoft Word document, you make a mess, and then you like go through and you clean it up and like revise it into a solid piece of choreography or a cohesive thought. So like first thing, because I think it can be intimidating to go ask these questions and try and make it really good, but like it doesn't have to be good. You can make like a huge mess and then pull it back in. You know, this doesn't have a lot of word count, so they're not asking you to write like really robust, profound research documents, right, that are going to be like published somewhere. They just want the like core information. So it's good to just write it all out. You probably have too many words, and then you can go and take words away. So let's see. So most things are going to ask you for like a mission statement or an artist statement. And it's really important to craft these to tie into whatever your project is that you're going to apply for. Haley, do you want to talk at all about maybe how you've crafted these things before?
Yeah, sure. I think that I have like a base artist statement that I pretty much work with, but I have like a lot of different like areas and things I'm interested in. Like I'm interested in like site-specific work and some placemaking, and I'm also interested in like experimental work as well, and then some work for stage, for proscenium. So if let's say the call is something like this is for like a non-traditional performance space, which is like, you know, a museum, so I would probably tailor it that way. So maybe something that I would write that would be for like a proscenium stage wouldn't apply. It's also something that's really community based. So like I would probably talk about experience, either things that I value about my experience working with the community and like why it's important to me as an artist. So it's like, it's kind of hard because you end up having to leave out part of things that you think are part of you, but like they don't have time to listen to the whole thing because we do so many different, we wear so many hats, you know? So I feel like it's just at least, I don't know, this is at least what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's a great point, because these are reviewed by like a panel of people that are probably looking at many applications and like reading a lot of text. And it's really important to just like get to the point of what is relevant to here, because they're just looking at your mission statement or your artist statement and also your bios and supporting materials later as like, do they show that they have the skills to do this project? So if it's something, you know, if Haley was writing in her mission statement how great she is at like theatrical lighting, but this isn't a museum, that's super not relevant, and it took someone's time. And actually I've seen that really backfire on panels where people are like, well, I don't think they would actually be interested in this museum work because here it says they like doing things on a proscenium stage, right? So like keeping it really specific to like what the location is, who's asking for the money or for the project, and what they value, and also what you value that relates to that is really important.
Also, just another side note about that is like anytime I apply for something like this, if I get it or if I don't get it, I always, once I find out if I do or not, I always go back and read the application. And if I don't get it, I'm usually like, oh, okay, that's why. And then sometimes when I do get it, I read the application, I'm like, oh, this is great. So I think that like pacing yourself with applying, I mean, because obviously the applications, but going back and looking at them retrospectively and like in relationships, like stuff like this is helpful, I think, for me.
Yeah. Is there Jojo? Are you someone who joined us?
Yes, I don't know how to add this.
Oh, and Ruby, are you here too?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Me too.
Hi. I'm seeing that there's like added people on here now. I mean, I can hear that you're present. Just to like fill you in, or this is really like more of a conversation. So if you have stuff to add, I mean, everyone here has probably applied for things in the past and has some input. So if you want to add to it, just hop on and say something. So we talked about a few things, but everyone just really wanted to talk more about the general like application process for things very broadly. So that's what we are focusing on for today. So I'm gonna go on. Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay.
Oh, actually, I do have a question about the seed program. So it's basically for the artists who need the rehearsal space, right?
Yeah, most of the nueBOX residencies are really focused on providing space for people that don't have access to it. And really that's kind of like the bulk of what we provide is space. So if, you know, like college students usually already have access to some space, so like we're not providing them anything they don't already have.
So,
go ahead.
oh yeah, so I was wondering, is there some other local nonprofit organization that will like give some support about developing works? Like for me, I only have opportunity to present my stuff on campus, but I also want to get some feedback from the local community and to just get fresh information. So is there any opportunities for programs that can help?
For sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that you could do at nueBOX, which we have the Revolve series. So if you have, and these are all postponed right now, but if you have something that you want to show and get feedback on, this is a great opportunity because they're pretty intimate showings, like, you know, like 10 to 15 people at a time, but we'll do like 2 or 3 shows throughout the night. And then there's time for people to have like conversations at the end of each showing. So so you can show like a 10, 20, 30-minute thing and then have a conversation with people where we'll facilitate like a short CRP for you, or if you just have questions that you want to ask the audience in a more like informal way, you can do that too. So it's really up to the artist. But it does get some like different people to come in, you know, some of the nueBOX community would be there, so you'd have different people to see your work and get some other input. Also, we are, you know, our staff is pretty happy to like come if you want to invite anyone to a rehearsal or like work with people, you know, we're usually pretty happy to like go and do that if you want just an outside eye or any questions asked. Right, Haley, am I speaking for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We usually will put a call out and then see who's available at that time and then see what we can do. I think the Revolve series is a good option though if you're just like an artist in the community, even if you are at the university, because it's like getting to perform. I mean, obviously it's suspended temporarily, but just getting to perform in like a new space, just being in a completely different space and like with different, like, I mean, it's a different structure. Yeah. So it could be good.
It's a different space, different inspirations.
Yeah, and also we have like a different body of people that like come to our events that maybe might not see you otherwise, and then like it's cyclical in the way that they see your work and they like it and they want to go see it at ASU, see your thesis or whatever, you know. But
so now the application for this is not open, right? It will be postponed.
Yeah, and this isn't actually even application based. It's more like if you have something to reach out to us. I would say we like book it, we plan like 6 months ahead. So, or at least quite a bit of time ahead. Like we won't do like 2 months before. You want to do something, we need a little bit more time than that. So if you know, you have your thesis coming up and you're like, oh, around this time, I would like to like do a showing of what I've done so far and get some input. You know, you could book something for around that time. If you're like, oh, in October, I'm gonna like show something here, then you could reach out to us now and like try and plan that. So you just have to send us an email.
Okay.
So it's not application based. Yeah.
I see there's the reservation button.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, this is actually, Tiffany was supposed to have a show coming up. So so it was an RSVP to go to the show. But if you want to do a Revolve, you can just send us an email right here to nueboxphoenix@gmail.com.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of some things. Let's see. Did you still want to talk about would you like to talk about writing a narrative, thinking about your bios or like supporting materials? Any of those sound most interesting to anyone? Tiffany, I feel like I worked with you a lot on writing a narrative last year. Do you want to share anything that you learned?
Yeah. You asked me a lot about what I was interested in, so I kind of went off that. But I have a lot of questions about like what kind of ideas are not acceptable but are good in those kinds of spaces or
Yeah, that's a good question. So in thinking about like the Tempe grants, what kind of projects would be of interest? Is that your question?
Yeah, and how to gather that data, like do you go around coffee shops and just like give surveys to people, or
I feel like that depends so much on what kind of project you're doing. Maybe I'm gonna go look at one that's like a little bit more, because there's 3 things here that are all asking for pretty different topics. Because like this Vibrant City grant is so broad, right? It gives you options of artist residencies and communities, workshops or panel discussions, like professional development, pop-up arts events, community arts programs, site-specific, right? So that's like lots of different things are acceptable. I think it's just going back to like who is the funder and like what do they care about. This is funded through arts engagement. So thinking about like, you can even look at what programs they offer and be like, oh, they like stuff like this that's like arts learning or like free public programs, right? Based on like some other things. I don't think that means that necessarily like if you have an idea that's outside of that, it's not eligible, right? That's definitely like if you have an idea to talk with the funder about your idea a little bit more and try and like work through it. See if there's maybe things that could feel good for both partners to like add to it that would make it a stronger program, or that a panel might respond to better, because again, who like decides on grant funding is not the staff. It's like a group of community members and artists. So like a lot of it is like, what are they going to respond to and want to fund? So I don't know, does anyone have any ideas for programs they were thinking about, and we could talk through them as a group a little bit? No ideas? You came to this with no things you might want to apply for? I don't believe that. I feel like someone here has some ideas. I think a good place to start is projects you're already working on, and maybe how to like add a layer to it or expand upon it, or like look into the next step of it. So maybe, I don't know if anyone wants to share something that they're actually working on right now that maybe wouldn't feel like a good fit for anything, and we can talk about how it might become a good fit, or what a next stage might look like.
I have something I've been like working on, like little rehearsal trio with some dancers, but it's kind of an interesting project just in the way that, well, it's not, this isn't interesting. We do this all the time, but as a pitch, it's interesting because it's like there's no content really. It was like, okay, let's just get in the space and do something. And I was actually doing this with some undergrads at Grand Canyon. But yeah, so it's kind of starting to develop, but there's not like and it's something I'd like to take out somewhere else, but it's like there's nothing concrete about it yet, except for it's like 3 people. So it's like just movement right now. So it's like, do I just give it another, like, how do I like develop this into something that's more concrete, I guess, for an application, you know? Or is it too early a stages for it to be ready for that, you know?
I feel like you brought up something so great, and this is something that Tiffany and I worked through quite a bit last year, was that a lot of times the way we work as dancers is not concrete, and we don't know what the outcome is until like way after we've received the funding and get to start working on it. But the people want to know like what this might look like, and so your whole narrative is trying to like paint a picture for people, especially people who don't understand dance, about what it's going to look like. And I see a lot of dancers get stuck in the trap of talking about the value of it in like our really like big terms of like it creates community and we build on each other and like all these things that like we know are so important to it ourselves, but like sometimes people are like, but what's it gonna be? And I think it helps to just imagine something with some specific details and know that it might change, and that's okay. Like you can be like, we're going to work with these 3 people and we're going to do pop-up performances in 3 locations around the city, and it's going to be about this topic. And that might completely change once you get into the process. You know what I mean? I mean, I think don't say like this is going to be about climate change and then make something about like domestic violence, right? Like it has to be like some grounding in like what you might be working on. But I think you can start to think about like what topics are of interest to you always as an artist. Like Haley, I know you're interested in like public place, or Tiffany, you're interested in healing and those kinds of things. That like what is always essential and like part of your work, and you can say that that's going to be what it's about, although it's going to go many levels deeper once you start working. And you can also give examples of, you know, when you're trying to write that clear description of like what it might be, even though this might completely change, you can write about like a hypothetical version, also because you're gonna have to write a budget. So like, what would this like hypothetical version be? How many people would be involved? How many times would it happen? What would be the mood of it? You know, like, is this gonna be like something that's uplifting to people around, or is it going to be something that lets people like sit and feel like deeply contemplative? Those kinds of like ranges of what the experience is going to be are things that you can write about, and they might change, and that's okay, but like you can at least start to think about what that might be. Does that help? Yeah. I think that's the hardest part for I think for dance especially, because in some other things, like, you know, you have a script and you're gonna work on a play, and like you know who all the players, you know, we're gonna have this director and this like lighting designer. But I think going with like what are the core things as an artist that all your work has in it is a good place to start with that.
Yeah, it helps me to think of it as just like a blob that is needing to be molded instead of just a product that I can get at the store, because sometimes that's how I can think of it.
I love that, a blob that needs to be molded.
Oh, blob.
That's really good assumption.
I feel like one thing I want to touch on that is not maybe related to like the city of Tempe things, but something that we run into with nueBOX applications, and I'm sure with residencies, if anyone's applying for residencies, this might be a thing that comes up for you. In our applications, we are like really asking people, again, because we understand that there's not a solid idea yet, so we're not these like other funders. We are funders of experimental dance, and we want people to not know what they're going to make before they come in. But I think that makes it really hard to answer some of these questions. So again, always looking like what are the actual questions, and we try and help you to write your artist statement. Like, who are you? What are you about? What makes you a good fit for this program, or why are you interested in it? And then we ask for like research content, because again, we don't want you to have like a product yet. but we want to know how are you going to research and what is your maybe like baseline product, or what is your like starting question, because we're usually going into like a art project with some kind of starting question or idea or thing that we're going to look into. So what is that, and like what are some tools you might use to figure that out? I think this is like the hardest part to clarify in residency calls, because they want to know how you work and how you spend your time. Haley, I don't know if you want to speak to this because you've applied to like a few different residencies.
Yeah. Often when applying to residencies, I talk about my modes of research, because I think it's, like you're saying, it's helpful for them to understand what that means. If that means like like solo, if you just kind of listing the things that you do, like solo studio time, interviews, journaling, it depends on like what you're reading. It could be like reading or writing poetry, or you could, if there's something specific that you're using, like a specific document that you're working with, like maybe like saying like this part of your research content is that you're working with this one text specifically. So I think that those are, I mean, they're all kind of just like tools that we use, and we forget that that's what our research content is, but I mean, that's really what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's like a huge thing, and just we want to, like, people want to know how you work, and not everyone like works in this modality that we've all like trained in at ASU. Like, I feel like we think that's what everyone does, but it's not. Like, and there's like a uniqueness to what you do specifically that it helps to talk through for people. I think another thing that comes up with like content and research is to avoid like really broad blanket statements, because those are like huge red flags. I'll give like an example of like one that says, in times like these, and we're like, in what part of the times like these, like, right? So it really like is these large like blanket statements are often not strong enough, whereas if it was like, just eliminate the words in times like these and say like specifically that you are addressing one element of something, or down the, like, what element of the time are you talking about, and how are your research methods addressing that. Or I think another one that dancers use a lot in applications is like building connection between people through like our physical bodies or something like that. Like the importance of like people communicating through touch, maybe not right now, but like the importance of people communicating through touch. We all know that's an important statement, but that there's like a layer to that of like, is it either like that people need to think about safe touch? Is it about that people need to think about, or that you're going to spend time thinking about like making touch acceptable to people who don't touch a lot? Like, there's a lot of like layers to what touch even means, and which avenue are you going to be looking into, because we've all seen a work in the past about contact improvisation. I think we had an application that was like really about it was trying to like talk about contact improvisation as something like new and like innovative and needing to be researched, and we had to like reconnect with the artist to dig a little bit deeper, that like it was more than just that, because we're like, well, that's been researched for years, and probably even like long before the 60s, contact improvisation was also a thing in many different communities and different social practices and dances. So like we had to dig much more out of that, which it would have been nice. It would have been better and strengthened their application if it just had outlined like their specific approach in their application. I feel like the last thing I really want to touch on is work samples. I think sometimes it can be hard because we want to show our best work, but we also want to show work that relates to whatever you're proposing, which can be really hard because maybe your past work isn't about what the work is that you're proposing. maybe I'm going to do something in a public space, but nothing that I've previously done is like in a public space. So does anyone have any suggestions of like how you make work samples that show your best work, but also relate to your project?
I have one. Like if you like what you said was a great example, but I think that it's okay in your application to say that, to say like that this is like a new modality for you, or like this is like this is a new place that you want to go to as an artist. Even then they can see, like if they see your work and notice that maybe it's not specifically like outdoors or like about certain content that you're interested in working in or whatever it may be, they'll be able to recognize if like you have a strength to be able to pull that into a different area. But I think it's okay to say that, to be like, hey, this is the first time I've ever done this, but now I want to do X. Like I've made proscenium work and now I want to make a work outside. These are like, but even if there's not a footage to clarify the difference between like whatever the two things are, I think making sure in your application you can kind of talk about like bridging the two of those so they can like be confident in your ability to do that.
Yeah, I think for dancers, video reels are really important. So that you're not showing like one clip of one work. And I think it goes back to like so like the way for like public art panels, like they don't even read their like cover letters usually in like the first few rounds. They just look at pictures of their past work and they're like, oh, I like this person and like what they do. So it kind of comes from that, a little bit of like people want to see what you do. And the best way for us to tell that story is to show a variety of things that you have done. And it even works to show if it's something that you haven't done before, you can put in the reel versions of really polished things that look finished, because that shows that you know how to like finish a project and make it of high quality. But you can also put in it like maybe smaller like improv things or test samples of like something related to the project that you're working on. But just make sure you put like text so that they know like, this is a finished piece. This is to give you an idea of what might come out of this project. But I think definitely showing like a variety of things that you've worked on is really important, and not just like 1 3-minute chunk. I mean, this depends on what you're applying for. If it's like a dance specific residency, sometimes they want to see like how you can build something over time. But if it's something for like a general or like broader all arts kind of thing, you just want to show that you can like make quality work and like specific, and show them like a variety of things that you've done that are good or that you feel good about or that relate to the project you're doing. Do you also want to talk about like how old things are in your work sample? I feel like you definitely want to show things that are newer and relevant to show like what you are currently doing. Sometimes it can really backfire on people when they show work that's maybe like 10 years old, because all of our mindsets change in 10 years. We are like very different people. And it also makes, if you only show something that's 10 years old and nothing newer, it makes people question like, well, are they doing anything? And will they like, have they not done anything in so long that they won't actually do this project? So I feel like there's like questions around that, and that's where that like real, if your best work you have is from 10 years ago and you want to show you can make something really great, you can include that in there, but make sure that there's other stuff that is more recent involved as well. Yeah.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if maybe you had already addressed this. It's a little bit going back to maybe the grant that you were talking about, the Sudden Opportunity Grant. So in that case, you have to be a nonprofit or you have to have fiscal sponsorship. Do different organizations require different forms of fiscal sponsorships? I know like Tempe Center, well, I forgot where I was looking into a grant, and I called them and I asked them, and then they said by formal agreement. Really, it was just a paper that said we both agree. So I'm wondering if there's different orgs that maybe somebody requires it be notarized, or are there different forms of sponsorship agreements?
Yeah, we definitely touched on this a wee bit earlier, but I think with most organizations, it's quite like low key, you know, like you could go, like we talked about Fractured Atlas as an option, which is a lot more work. But if you just know a nonprofit, so like I was talking about nueBOX fiscally sponsors like Flamenco Por La Vida and like Worth the Wait. And that's just like, I sent them a letter, like, yes, we promise to fiscally sponsor you for this project. And like, that was it. We actually have on here on my screen, if you can see it, a sample template. So just all these grants down here, these bottom three, you can apply as an individual artist or LLC, but this top one does require fiscal sponsorship or a nonprofit. Actually have a template that people can use for fiscal sponsorship.
Okay, cool.
It's on here. This is the longer version I had mentioned of an application. Yeah, so here we have a little template.
Add it.
And I'll show you real quick because it's super basic. And I actually got this, Ashley Hare made this for the city of Phoenix, and I kind of just tweaked it a little bit. So you basically just say who's the grant recipient, who's the fiscal agent, and then they sign, and then that's it. This one also has that there's no like percentage that the fiscal sponsor will get.
And I think I remember learning that typically most orgs ask on average like 8%. Have you seen that commonly be used?
Yeah, I think it can range like 8 to 15%. We were talking about earlier that it's best if you know a nonprofit that you work with to ask them to do it, because and they might not charge that. Like again, like we don't charge a percentage from nueBOX when we fiscally. It literally takes me to like take a check and then write a new check. I don't know what that like admin fee is personally. I think it's kind of ridiculous. So I think if you know a nonprofit that will like fiscally sponsor you, and most organizations will let one nonprofit fiscally sponsor several projects too. So if you know someone or you work with someone already, and they don't even need to be an arts organization for like most arts grants too. So yeah, if you're working with any other community group, they can fiscally sponsor you.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions, y'all? Okay, last big thing, if you are going to apply for any of these, please, one really good thing to do is send your draft to me or whatever organization before submitting it. You can meet one-on-one to go into more deep. Once you've started to write and flesh out your proposal, you can meet and like go through stuff a little bit more. Or you can send your narrative over for feedback on like a Word document or something. And that is like really successful. For City of Tempe grants, like everyone who has met with me has received, with myself or my boss Maja, has like received the grant and scored significantly higher than others. It's just like, just do it. Don't write it last minute, like the night before. It'll help you so much to just take that extra step, do it a little bit earlier and get some feedback. Yeah. All right, well, I'm glad you all came to chat with me. I'm glad that we could connect, and it's so good to talk to people. I'm so lonely.
Thanks so much for sharing this. It's very helpful.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thanks, y'all. Bye.
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 Bye.